I'm excited to bring you a new Slow-Fi interview with Diania Merriam, the creator of the EconoMe Conference. We stopped in Cincinnati a few weeks ago to visit Diania and get this interview. In this interview, we talk through how Diania went from being $30,000 in debt to turning around her finances to eventually using the financial freedom that she's built to design an unconventional life. There's a lot of layers to this interview and a number of themes that she hits on, particularly reflecting on the role that money can play in our lives. At the end of the interview, we asked Diania about advice that she would give to others, and I think you'll really appreciate it, so stick around to the end. Let's get into the interview.
So I'm Diania Merriam. I'm the creator of the EconoMe Conference. I also host the Optimal Finance Daily podcast. Really feel like my life has been completely reoriented around rest. And I'm still 2.5 years after quitting my job, decompressing from the burnout of working that much and putting work up on a pedestal and realizing that my whole sense of self-worth is tied up in productivity and a job, right? And really trying to untangle a lot of that is a lot of work. It's a lot of healing. It's a lot of introspection. My nervous system has been dysregulated for decades. And so working on repairing that is my new full-time job. So I would say that my 80% of my time is oriented around rest. I spend a lot of time reading, meditating, journaling, taking walks, going for hikes, hot yoga, a lot of exercise. I love to cook. So I spend a lot of time meal planning and cooking. So much time creating. I just do a lot of writing. I do a lot of reflecting. My pace of life is just a lot slower.
I really identify with Diania's story related to rest and mental health. At the same time, I know that Diania still needs to work to generate some income to cover her expenses. So I wanted to understand more about how much work does she actually do now and how does she balance that with the life that she's created and her focus on rest.
So technically I do 4 hours of paid work, right? That's the podcast. I have a daily show called Optimal Finance Daily where I'm reading articles and offering a little commentary on it. So that's kind of technically I work 4 hours a week of paid work, but I also have the EconoMe Conference and every week is different. And I really try to follow the ebbs and flows of my energy. And how much rest, I got. What does the ring say my readiness score is that day? And how good I'm feeling to come, to tackle a complicated task, to reach out to potential speakers, to pitch, prospects for sponsorship, to do work on marketing and all that kind of stuff for the conference. I would say on average, maybe I'm working 4 hours a day on a variety of things, but there are so many days where it's it's all rest, it's just, I don't have it in me that day. And most of my work is creative now. And so I've learned that when I try to force creativity, it just doesn't work. And so a lot of it is resting so that when inspiration strikes, I'm ready to sit there and write for 3 hours.
Diania currently has an incredible balance in her life. But it wasn't always this way. When she learned about financial independence, this was the catalyst. It was the first domino to fall as she went from being someone who really identified with her job and was climbing the corporate ladder to someone who's now focused on designing a life that she loves and figuring out how she wants work to fit into that life.
I first discovered FIRE when I was 28. And at the time I was 30 grand in debt. I just realized I was 30 grand in debt. I had no awareness around this. I ran a credit report on myself and added it all up. And I was like, oh wow, okay, I should probably do something about this. And I had started just kind of researching online, how to improve your finances, and I stumbled across the FIRE movement during that process. I think I actually had a friend who sent me an article from Mr. Money Mustache. And that was my first introduction to FIRE. Before that, everything else I had read had that real tone of struggle to it. You know, that whole Dave Ramsey, like, eat rice and beans, and this is going to be hard, and, you know, you got to deprive yourself if you want to improve your finances. And when I read Mr. Money Mustache, I felt like it had a real tone of optimism to it. Like, this is an incredible opportunity. And that was the first thing I read that got me really excited about fixing my finances, for sure. So that was when I was 28, and I think I became pretty obsessed with Mr. Money Mustache. I was really like gung-ho. I read every single article. I like to say I devoured that blog with a spoon. And I was pretty hardcore. I got out of my 30 grand of debt in 11 months. It was like a complete 180. And then I started saving and investing 60% of my income from there.
Real quick, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Both of those things go a long way in helping us reach more people.
I think when I first started, I think I was kind of very similar to a lot of people in the FIRE movement, where a scarcity mindset was really driving my ambition. And I think where I've evolved is I have a much more abundant mindset now. Like, I will reach FIRE, financial independence, 25 times my yearly expenses. I will reach that at some point because I'm still saving and investing. But I just feel like getting there is almost irrelevant because I wouldn't change anything about my life anymore. Like, that milestone would not cause me to make any changes. So it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter as much as it used to.
Diania has undergone a huge transformation over a long period of time. She went from being $30,000 in debt to being gung-ho about financial independence and retiring early to no longer feeling attached to the plan. I love when she says that if she magically reached financial independence tomorrow, nothing in her life would need to change. I asked her how she mentally made that transition from being gung-ho about FIRE to focusing more on her current lifestyle, and here's what she had to say.
I think specifically when it comes to my approach to FIRE, what led me there, I think it happened over a very long period of time. We're talking about 8 years, and a lot of like my new insights around money are relatively new. And I think it's from coming to this realization that, you know, being engaged in this community, there's one thing that I like to do in my local FI group where we do case studies. And we look at each other's finances, we poke holes, we challenge each other, we look at each other's plans and offer insights that we see as like a third party, onlooking party. And one of the things that really stands out to me is I'm like surrounded by millionaires that are looking at their bank accounts and all they feel is fear. And that I think has been really impactful to me, because I think when you put so much work and intention around being responsible with your money, if you don't look at your net worth and feel a sense of peace, then what's the point? You know, I think that, again, that just kind of goes back to this whole scarcity mindset thing, and recognizing that some of the behaviors that helped me get out of debt that maybe were appropriate at a time in my life when my hair was on fire are no longer appropriate now. I'm just in a different season of life financially, and I don't think some of the mindsets that first got me into this serve me anymore.
As I've gotten to know more about Diania and learn more about her transformation, I've come to understand that a lot of things changed after she took a 2-month break to walk the Camino de Santiago, a 500-mile trek across Spain. I asked her what prompted this trip and what she learned from it. And spoiler alert, it wasn't what she expected.
When I first decided I wanted to do the Camino, my ambition was really to go with my aunt and uncle. So my aunt had done the Camino when she was in her 40s. She told me about it when I was in my young 20s, and she said that my uncle wanted to do it for his 70th birthday, which to me to walk 500 miles across the country at 70 years old felt like wildly irresponsible. Like I just thought that he was gonna get hurt, that he was gonna need help. Like my ambition was really to like go and support him to go do this crazy thing. And so the more and more I prepared myself for it in reading books about it and getting myself ready financially, it kind of shifted to me wanting to do it for myself. And once I got out of debt and I was saving all this money, I kind of had this realization that I've got no debt, I've got no man, I've got no kids. I actually have a lot of freedom that people dream about, and I'm not doing anything with it. Like I felt like I was wasting an opportunity. And so that really was another motivation to want to go on the Camino. And I really was convinced that I was going to figure out my whole life on the Camino, that I was just going to be walking along and doing all this soul searching and all of that kind of thing. And I definitely, and you always get what you need on the Camino. I'll just say that. But I came back very disappointed because I didn't figure my whole life out. And I think in many ways I learned a lot on the Camino, but I can't wait to do it again. The thing about the Camino is it attracts kind of a person with depth to them, right? You're not talking about really superficial things with the people that you meet. You're talking about the spiritual reasons you're doing this crazy pilgrimage. You know, you're talking about, you know, you're walking next to someone for 8 hours a day. You just end up going really, really deep. And I remember when I got back from the Camino and I had to dive back into work, and I went on this, to this dinner with some colleagues. I had a colleague visiting from LA, and my boss had invited to go out to dinner with her. And we had I worked with a lot of celebrities and stuff. Like there was a celebrity portfolio that I wasn't in a lot of it, but let's just say there was a very famous person who you would know who it is, and had a photo shoot that day where her butt was hanging out. And my colleague, the whole dinner, was just talking smack about this butt hanging out. And I just remember sitting there thinking, this can't be my life. You know, this is such a stupid thing to spend time talking about. I was just talking about the deeper questions of life for 2 months. And now I'm going to talk about someone's attire at dinner. It just felt so superficial and stupid. I think when it comes to the community I found on the Camino, the FI community reminds me a lot of that, because I think the kind of person that's attracted to FI also has some depth to them, right? And as much as we talk about money, I like to think as money as just the gateway to all of the other things that we're interested in. Really, we want to use money as a tool to live a good life. So most of the time we're talking about living a good life, you know? And I feel like there's a lot of parallels there for me in the people I met on the Camino and the people I now engage with in the FI community. The other big thing I got out of the Camino was just changing where my identity was rooted. So before that, I think I had a lot of ego wrapped up in my job. You know, I had an office in the Empire State Building. I had all these big fancy clients, and you know, it was a very creative, revenue driving kind of career. And I was in sales, so it's bragging about the big deal that I'm working on, right? Nobody cared about that on the Camino. Literally no one asked me what I did for a living. And that was, I think, really good for me. It was really humbling. It was helped me see that I'm way more than my job, and that I got to see a side of myself that I guess I wasn't used to seeing.
Even though the Camino wasn't what she expected, it still changed her outlook. It changed what she cared about, what she talked about, and she started to disassociate her identity from work. At the time, she was still focused on retiring early. So I wanted to understand more about what changed between then and now, and why she decided to quit her job. Here's what she has to say.
So what changed with my employment dynamic is, remember that great boss that I told you about that was so excited for me to walk the Camino and go on this adventure and all of that kind of stuff? She was no longer my boss. I got a new boss the last year I worked there. And the dynamic just really completely changed. I mean, the dynamic of my employer changed very slowly over a long period of time. I was at the company for 9 years. Probably about halfway through that, we were sold to a much bigger company. We were acquired, and then we were spun off, and then we were joint ventured, right? It was just a lot of change in management over like the period of probably 5 years. And it went from a female-owned and run organization where we had 5 offices around the world, all run by women, to very slowly over time a boys club. And, you know, moving to Cincinnati in 2017, a lot of like the shift in the culture of the company, I felt like I was kind of removed from it because I worked remotely. And I was so focused on other things, you know, I was starting my conference, I took on this podcasting job, like I had so much more in my life besides just work. So I think like a lot of this it felt like it was happening under my nose and I just like didn't even realize it. But I woke up one day and realized that I was the only woman on my team. I was one of the highest performers and I was the lowest paid. And the reason why this came to my attention, now I had known for a long time that I was underpaid, but because I was getting these privileges of like taking 2 months off and walking the Camino, like that was on me that I didn't ask for any raises or anything after that. I think I was so grateful for the privileges I was getting that, you know, but I didn't sign up to never get a raise again or to be underpaid for like the rest of my life, right? By this point, 3 years had gone by. And I still hadn't gotten a raise. And what was happening is like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, there's this kind of bigger discussion around diversity and inclusion, which really is about equality. And so I would find myself being like pulled into these team meetings where I'm the only woman on the call. And it's like, Diana is the only woman on the team. Like, what do you think about diversity and inclusion? And I just said, I feel like it's about pay parity. Like if you actually want to do something about this, it's about pay parity. And so I took it as an opportunity to like, if you guys are actually saying that you care about this, well then let me make my case about getting, you know, my pay more in line with my male colleagues. And there was a lot of, I guess, very surprising things that came out during that conversation. The idea that I'm somehow disadvantaged because of my gender is just, again, I couldn't wrap my head around it. And so being in that situation, what I realized is that my integrity would not let me stay. And there were other women that I worked with that were in the same. They were in different departments, right? I was the only female on my team, but they were in different departments. They were in the same exact situation, but financially they were stuck. They couldn't leave. And I looked at my money and said, I have way too much money to tolerate this kind of bullshit. I really do. And so I left and I wrote a letter on the way out that was kind of jointly written with these other women. It was very specific on like my details and the reason why I was leaving, but they all read it and they all gave me their input. And so I felt like I got to speak on their behalf as well and say things that they felt like they couldn't say. And that to me was like using my financial position to do what I felt like was the right thing to do. I did not intend to quit my job. I found myself in a situation that was intolerable. And I feel really fortunate that I was able to leverage my financial position to get myself out of that situation. You know, it's like we work so hard to save up an emergency fund and to protect our money, but at what point are we going to let our money protect us, right? It's like, what's the point of having all this money sitting there if it's not going to, if I can't use it to help me navigate something like this in life, right? If I was fired from my job or laid off, I wouldn't hesitate to use my emergency fund to navigate that situation. It's like, why don't we see a toxic work environment as an emergency? Because I really think it is.
Diania left her job to uphold her integrity. She used her financial freedom not only to improve her own life, but to stand up for herself and others who weren't in the same financial position. I wanted to understand more about why Diania decided to make such a significant change rather than finding a job with a different employer. Here's what she had to say.
I did consider like going to one of the competitors. I got to find another job. Like that's kind of what I was gearing up to. That was instinctually what I felt like I needed to do. And I think talking this over with my 5 friends, with the people in this community, they all convinced me that like I actually do have enough money to take a risk. And at the time I was making a little bit of 1099 income from the podcast that I host. You know, I have this business, the EconoMe Conference, which still to this day has not made me any money. Like I don't consider it part of my livelihood. There are financial benefits to it, but it's not like I'm paying my mortgage with the profits from that. So it wasn't like I had no income coming in or nothing to do with my time, right? I had 2 other things that are considered work that I felt like could open doors to other sources of income. And I felt like I just had an opportunity to try something different and to test some of my fears, you know? And I think I had a lot of ego wrapped up in a 6-figure salary that it's been good for me to kind of let it go. You know, 2022 is the first year that my income was so low, it was like less than I made even in college. And back when I first quit my job, the idea of that was so scary. And now that I'm living it, it's like recognizing that I don't need more money, I just need enough money has been a very freeing idea. I think that now where I'm at, I know we're talking about the thought process at the time, but there's so much of it that's rooted in fear and like just being willing to step into the unknown. But now that I'm looking back on it, it's like I'm so much better off from being able to kind of right size the role that work plays in my life, to recognize that like a full-time job, there's no room in my life for that anymore. There just isn't. You know, I'm getting paid for 4 hours a week and sometimes that's too much. Like it's just, I think there's diminishing returns to making more money that you don't necessarily need. And being able to recognize that at a certain point of financial stability, the risk flips from being worried about running out of money to being worried about running out of time. And you know, a lot of us are saving our money and building our nest egg to like get to something, to get to this place where we think we're all of a sudden going to give ourselves permission to live differently and be able to fully enjoy our time. And I don't think we realize that there is no amount of money that is ever going to make you feel that way. And so now I'm able to see that. But at the time, when I quit, it's almost like mental gymnastics. I didn't tell myself I was retiring or semi-retiring or taking a gap year or whatever it was. I told myself I'm experimenting with self-employment for 1 year. And if I can't replace my income in 1 year, I'm going to go find another job. And that is just, it's been 2.5 years and now I have absolutely no interest in finding another job. But it's because I've been able to kind of see how it's worked out. And I just think my relationship with money is so much different now than it was when I made that decision.
I love this discussion on how much is enough. And when we're talking about enough, we're not just talking about money. Once we have enough money, we start to focus on how much is enough time and right-sizing the role that work plays in our lives. To close out the interview, we ask Diania what advice she has for others. Here's what she has to say.
I would say more money is not going to alleviate your fears. More money is not going to make you feel safer. I think that's our assumption, that if we had more money, then we would allow ourselves to do XYZ. It's just not true. Like, from what I can see from my own life and other people's life, like, your bank account cannot give you the permission that you need to give yourself. So let your curiosity be bigger than your fear. And it is highly likely that you already have enough money to make a change. Like, if you're watching this, it's highly likely you're already in the position to do what you want to do. The money is not what's stopping you.
Thank you so much, Diana, for sharing your story with us. A lot of what Diana shared reminds me of a Boston College study done with ultra-rich people. And when I say ultra-rich, I'm talking about people with a net worth of more than $25 million. In the study, they found that on average, no matter how many millions of dollars people had, they felt like they needed 25% more to be financially secure. If you're barely making ends meet, 25% more is a lot and is going to really help you out on a daily basis. But once you're in a more financially secure position, sometimes it's no longer about the money. What we really need to do is figure out how much is truly enough for us and move from that scarcity mindset to a place of abundance. As I mentioned earlier, Diana is the founder of the EconoMe Conference. If you've stuck around this long, you may also be looking for a like-minded community to help you move forward on your own path to financial independence. If so, I would encourage you to check out the EconoMe Conference. At the time of this recording, the next EconoMe Conference will be happening in March of 2024. We've put a link for 10% off in the description below. We don't receive any compensation for this, but are promoting it because we truly believe in the value that this event provides. We hope to see you there. If you enjoyed this video, I'd encourage you to check out the other interviews that we've done. We regularly interview ordinary people who are designing extraordinary lives. It's impossible to watch these interviews and not leave inspired.